Welcome to Current Affairs. My name is Nathan Robinson. I am the editor-in-chief of Current Affairs magazine. My guest today is Alex Lawson, executive director of Social Security Works and convening member of the Strengthen Social Security Coalition. Alex Lawson, thank you for joining us on Current Affairs.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're talking today because people do not talk enough about Social Security. Republicans want to kill Social Security, but they don't like to talk about Social Security, partly because I think they know that the conversation is a losing one for them. But that does not change the fact that they are working every minute of every day, slowly behind the scenes, to destroy Social Security. And you, Alex Lawson, are trying to prevent that from happening. I want to start, however, by asking you, let's go back in time a little bit, and let's just reassess and think a little bit about the achievement that Social Security represents. And perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the fight to get it, and the fact that we didn't always live in an era where we had this important benefit.
Yeah, it's a great question, great part of the story. Back when Social Security was created, you do have to actually look a little bit like further before that, because everyone sort of knows the story of Social Security was created in the Great Depression. At that time, the country was facing catastrophe. And, at that time, 1 in 2 seniors were living in poverty. So 50% of seniors were living in poverty. There are poorhouses in every state in the country except for one, New Mexico, which I don't know why, but it is true that there was not one in New Mexico. Poorhouses are a concept that we don't even have in our brains anymore. Poorhouses were debtors' prisons. It's where you went if you ran out of money and didn't have family to support you. And importantly, the doors were locked at night, right? This was not a place that you could leave. And in fact, like the poorhouse was sort of the boogeyman that people would use to push their children. Well, you better study in school or you'll
end up in the warehouse where we put poor people. Yeah.
And in point of fact, there's a great one that I love, which is in the original Monopoly board, across the board from the jail, the other corner was the poorhouse.
Okay.
So you could go to jail, you could end up in the poorhouse. Now you get Social Security and the poorhouse is eliminated as a concept, right? It just doesn't exist anymore because Social Security is there to protect people in their retirement if they run out of wages, because in a capitalist society that's based on wages, if you don't have wages, you have to figure out something to do. And that something used to be the poorhouse, and then it was Social Security. And there's more, but I will just say what I love is, what that space on the Monopoly board is now? It's free parking.
Free parking.
From the poorhouse to free parking.
We've marked human progress through the progress of the Monopoly board.
A Monopoly board. But you do have to go, like, where did those ideas come from? And they're earlier. So obviously, it was during the crisis of the Great Depression that Francis Perkins and the New Dealers, working with FDR, saw the opportunity to do these things, to implement these things. But these ideas come from before. You can read Eugene Debs and see a lot of these ideas that are in the New Deal rejected previously as he loses. And, John Nichols has a great bit where he says, what is losing when your ideas are winning? But there was a movement at the time that said the capitalist billionaire class that's running the country and having these periodic upheavals, right? Where they're like, wow, every 10 years, the whole system just blows up and everyone gets poor except for the billionaires. And there was a counter movement that said, if we all work together, we can actually lessen the risk to all of us. And those ideas, that's what becomes Social Security. In the Social Security Act, there was also supposed to be national health care, right? Because everyone saw that you can't actually have security if you can go bankrupt if you get sick or injured. So the original intent of Social Security was this big and expanding system of economic security for everyone in this country. And that is an important thing to remember when we're talking about Social Security, is that it's not just the system that eliminated or reduced senior poverty to just the same levels as the general population, which is too high, but it's still not 1 and 2. And I will also put in there just really quickly that Social Security didn't do it alone for seniors, because we don't really see the reduction to average numbers until we also get Medicare some decades later, because it really is true that you can't have economic security without that health component.
So, Social Security, as you point out, the achievement was the culmination of a decades-long struggle. At the turn of the century, the situation is really just desperate for people who can't earn a living through labor, like people who are old and who are sick. There's nothing there for them, and so there's a fight. And it is safe to say, I think, going back to these times as well, that the right has always despised this idea of having the government care for people who cannot earn a living through their labor, or who deserve to not have to labor because they have worked for many, many decades. So could you talk about perhaps the early history of the right's attempt to thwart these social insurance ideas?
Absolutely. So I think your show, your audience, the reason I'm expanding on this is because it is important to always remember, and I think your audience understands, that it's a dynamic system. So the fight didn't happen when we won it. It was decades of fighting. And so the reactionary forces hated everything about the ideas that Francis Perkins and the other New Dealers were pushing. And they hated them because in their hearts, they knew that it worked to do this, but they don't want it because these are the plutocrats, the robber barons, the ones who are having the parties where they have jewelry in sand in the Carnegie, the famous, you could dig out diamonds during the dinner party. Like, the only way that works is if you have a mass of people to exploit. And so they don't want people to have economic security. So we're winning. And then the Great Depression happens, and it's like, actually, the whole idea of capitalism is, for the first time, really held up as maybe this isn't going to work. And at the time, the forces of pure fascism and communism were both really big happening, right? Like, you had the Soviet Union and you had fascist growth in Europe. I don't need to go the whole history. The idea of the New Deal was actually aimed at creating a form of capitalism that could work, a democratic socialism or something of that nature, but a very uniquely American idea on that as well. And that's where the New Deal sort of like comes in as this saving force that people have been demanding. And I will say, at the time, it was a compromise. There was a much larger push for a much greater redistributive policy that was incredibly popular at the time, before the internet or much. It was called the Townsend Plan. You had all these little grassroots groups that were pushing for the Townsend Plan, and Social Security was the compromise. But importantly, the Republicans hated it, right? I mean, the plutocrat reactionary forces, they hated it all the way through. They fought it tooth and nail into passage. And then the first presidential candidate after it passed, his name's Alf Landon. He ran, his entire campaign was against Social Security. That was the whole thing he did. He's most famous, for people who remember his name, as the dude who lost every single state but 2 when he ran for president, because they have always been against these programs, these systems that work. And that has always been a deeply unpopular position to be in.
Right.
And so they've gotten sneakier at hiding.
And so it became so popular so quickly after it was actually put into place, and people could see the benefits. By the 1950s, Eisenhower was saying that, anyone who ran against Social Security would never win an election in the United States. But that doesn't mean that the fight to end or gut Social Security ended. Just because it is extremely popular, just because taking a stance like the Alf Landon position is clearly not going to work and hasn't worked since Social Security came into effect, does not mean that the fight to end it has stopped. And you point out, you testified to the Senate Budget Committee. In your testimony, you cite these extraordinary quotes from conservatives in the Reagan era, laying out what they call a Leninist plan to end Social Security. Like the Leninists, the revolutionaries working behind the scenes.
Yes. And that is where it moved to. This throws people off. I did it in my testimony as well, that Reagan actually was like sort of the last of the Republicans who wasn't totally hell bent on destroying Social Security. He actually was, but he got grilled for it so hard that he gave us some of our best quotes where he says, Social Security has nothing to do with the deficit. It's fully funded by the payroll tax. It's a great clip that I use to great effect still because, it's Reagan. But the truth is that the Reagan thing that happened, it was big money figured out how to take over or break our political system at the time. It was a shocking thing, his win. But the money people, the bagmen behind him over at Cato, over at Heritage, that's who we're plotting. Now we've got our guy in there. How are we going to destroy Social Security? And they didn't actually get it done. They thought they were going to get it done in 1983. But Reagan, which is when there was an action forcing event, something had to happen. Some legislative action had to happen. And they thought Reagan was going to be able to destroy it then. He runs into the buzzsaw of public opinion and he ends up not. But he does put in a grand bargain, right? So there were benefit cuts in that package. Yours and my retirement age is going to be 67. A lot of people still think it's 65, but Reagan raised it 2 years, which is just a 7% benefit cut for each year that's raised. Not like a 7%. It's just a mathematical calculation. You don't actually have to retire on your retirement age. It's actually just when you get your full benefits. So it had this big benefit cut in it. And it did have some tax side stuff. It had a bunch of other things as well. But it's right after that they really hit the gas on this Leninist strategy of knowingly lying about what it is that they're trying to do in order to pit different parts of the population against each other. So they want to pit the old against the young. They want to do that by telling the old, like, oh, well, we're definitely not going to cut your benefits. So don't worry, we're only going to cut the young people's benefits, and telling the young, oh, well, it's going to be out of money. You're never going to get anything. So we need to cut these old people's benefits, and really stoking that intergenerational warfare, a divide and conquer strategy. But the main purpose of that Leninist strategy document, there's a lot in there, but is basically to say, lie to the people, lie about what it is that you're trying to do, because we have to destroy this program. We have to gut Social Security. And the only way to do it is to lie to people about what it is that we're trying to do. And that has been their mantra and MO up to now.
Well, it's understandable why they feel so hell-bent on destroying Social Security. As you point out, it's not just to make exploitation easier, that's part of it, but also the success of Social Security disproves so many conservative talking points, because it's the government providing welfare or universal benefits to people, and it works. And it makes people's lives better, and it reduces poverty. And if one of the core conservative talking points is over and over, nothing the government does can be done right. Everything the government does to try and fix a social problem will inevitably backfire and cause disaster and misery and bureaucracy. Social Security really kind of undermines a lot of their case.
It totally undermines their case. And the other one is efficiency. It's the most efficient thing you can imagine. It does everything it does. And, it provides benefits for people who retire in old age. It provides benefits for people who face a life-changing illness or accident, become disabled, can no longer work, for their surviving children and the loss of a breadwinner. Oftentimes in a disaster or a mass casualty event like 9/11 or something like that, the first touch that grieving families have from the federal government is a Social Security survivor's benefit to minor children. and military families. The list goes on and on about how massive this system is. For example, just because of the survivors benefits, by magnitude of dollars, Social Security is the largest children's program in the United States. Because when you have a universal program, you're talking about this huge magnitude. There's nothing really else like it. And it does all of that for less than 1% administrative costs. So less than 1 penny of every dollar that goes in that you pay into the system is used to pay for the whole thing. And look at Wall Street. Like, that's why they hate it. You know, they like people scrabbling and not being able to have enough time and comfort to think about, like, hey, why do these guys have all the money? That's true. They're also just straight up greedy, right? They look at it and they're like, we should be the only ones who offer products like that. And we would sock on a 35% fee.
Right. It's a pool of wealth that could be siphoned.
And that's it. They just hate that they can't get their greedy little hands on it, you know?
Right.
So it really does disprove backwards and forwards the entire conservative, small c conservative, reactionary mindset.
Yeah, just like the private health insurance industry is. Well, how can we get sick people to give us a portion of their wealth? Which they successfully do.
And that's why they hate Medicare for All so much, right? They know that anything that guarantees health care does a better job more efficiently than it. And they're terrified of the people finding out about that, right? They really don't want people to find out that the VA, which is fully socialized healthcare, that's different than Medicare for All, which is just one single payer, but that the VA is consistently ranked higher in terms of outcomes, quality, and what people feel about it than private insurance. So again, they really hate things that work. You know, they hate public education because it works.
Right.
They hate it. That's why they hate it. And they have to lie and create this whole story that, like, oh no, actually the private sector does everything better. You know, oh, you want to wait to get a doctor's appointment? And you're like, have you tried to get a doctor's appointment, my man? Because you wait right now. You wait. Oh, well, you want to bring in bureaucracy of that. And you're like, have you literally ever called a corporation? It's the most nauseating bureaucracy you'll ever deal with. And then they hang up on you. So that's the system that they want.
Yeah.
And I will just sort of end on this rant part on those systems do work well for the wealthy, right? That's the key. They are never going to face the pain on those private systems. American healthcare actually works really well if you're super rich. It's a really well-functioning rich person system. But for everyone else, it's a disaster. It's a wealth extraction system. It's not a healthcare system.
Yes, to go into a little more depth about some of these lies and myths that are pushed, because I think it's really, really important to help train people to see through this stuff. Because as you've indicated, there is a strategy to talk publicly in positive terms about Social Security. You know, George W. Bush and Donald Trump and everyone, they're saying, oh yeah, Social Security, very important. We Republicans, we respect Social Security. And then to sneakily say things or propose things that are designed to sound like they're not commitments to undermine or destroy Social Security, but are. So perhaps you could show us some of the ways in which Republican rhetoric about we're not going to touch Social Security conceals the true agenda.
The one that I think is top of mind to me, because we have a videographer, we have a tracker on the Hill who's just asking Republicans, forcing, you know, what are you talking about when you say Social Security? What are you holding the debt ceiling hostage for to accomplish with Social Security? And this Republican, Rick Allen, was like, people call me and say they want to work longer. So I want to raise the retirement age to 75 because people want to work longer. This is a dude who's worth $52 million and he's fine with everyone else working till they die. And I alluded to this before. Matt Brunig actually has a great piece on the math of this, but retirement age has nothing to do with the age at which you retire. It's really annoying. It should be called full benefits age or something like that. but it's a mathematical formula. And so that age is actually used to calculate, because you can retire, quote unquote, early or later. And if you retire before your full benefit age, your benefit is reduced 7% for every year that you retire early. And you can actually retire months early, right? Like it's 12 months. It's not done by the year, it's done by each month. Or you can increase your benefit by retiring later. And in the exact same way that that happens, the same magnitude, 7% per year, any increase in the full benefit age, or the so-called retirement age, is just a 7% across the board benefit cut to Social Security. So moving it up to 75, it's 67 right now. So to 70, which you also hear a lot, is a 21% benefit cut, right? That's just out of no one supports that. If you forced Lindsey Graham, who pushes the 70-year-old one often, 75 is a little bit even extreme by the Republican standards. That is where Rick Allen and the Republican Study Committee are.
Yeah, they'll get there eventually.
Yeah. If you force Lindsey Graham to do it, I tried to do it when I was testifying in budget, you'll see him dance around. Because, like, if you ask anyone, literally anyone in this country who doesn't work for Wall Street, do you support a 21% benefit cut to Social Security? They will reject you. I go around this country, I talk to lots of different types of people. It does not matter if it's camo NRA hats in the audience or a bunch of electric vehicles in the parking lot. Everyone loves Social Security, and that's why they lie about it. And, they say, oh, well, everyone's working longer. That one is rejected because even if people don't understand the benefit cut side or the mathematical, that part, they're like, I don't want to work longer. No, people do not want to work longer.
Yeah.
So there are ones that are even like more wonky and annoying. Like they go after the COLA, which is the automatic payment increase that happens to make sure that your benefits keep pace with inflation. For the last, decade, it really hasn't seemed that important. But now people understand the beauty of this part of the benefit. And it's not a gift. It's part of the benefit is that it's an inflation protected social insurance annuity. So it does not erode over time. So what they do is they let's just use a different formula to calculate that. And they're like, it's more accurate. And all of it is sort of BS that you can always call out by asking them, like, does it, quote unquote, save money? And if it does, quote unquote, save money, that means benefits are cut.
Right. Because the money's only going one place.
Exactly.
Right.
So all of their proposals are savers in DC parlance. And that means that they're all benefit cuts.
Right. So when you hear the phrase save money, go, save money on what? On paying old people, their benefits.
You're saving my money directly into your pocket. So there are some more, and we can go over some of them. I do think there's one progressive price index, the PPI, that they love because it has the word progressive in it. So then it really confuses people.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like they're going to trot that one out this time around.
Sure.
But we are dealing with a faction of Republicans in the House that are less sophisticated than the Tea Party, it seems to me. The Tea Party were the ones who pushed the chain CPI, the COLA adjustment. I'm not sure that Kevin McCarthy's proposals aren't going to be just full bore, let's just decimate the program.
Right.
The last one I'll say that is sort of their favorite is they're like, oh, well, we don't even know what we want. And that's the tell right there. They know what they want. They're just scared of saying it.
Sure.
So they say, let's create a commission and give this commission the force of law through an up or down vote. So whatever the commission comes up with then is guaranteed a vote. That's Mitt Romney's push. That's the most dangerous one in my eyes.
Well, I was going to ask you about the let's put together a bipartisan blue ribbon commission to form the other phrase that should send your antennas is grand bargain, right? A grand bargain. I think it's also worth mentioning that there are some Democrats who cannot be trusted to fight for Social Security in the way that we need, because this whole let's put together a commission thing depends on having some people who are on the center but in the other party to be willing to rubber stamp this, right? I mean, this is Bernie Sanders had to take on Barack Obama about this, I seem to remember.
Yeah, I was there. It was a lonely fight at the time. I will say that it's totally different now. We've got way more allies. And like this interview, first of all, I don't think you didn't exist then, right?
I existed, but the institution was not yet formed. Yeah.
So we didn't have our own ability to tell our story about what's actually going on. And the corporate media is totally part and parcel of this assault on Social Security. And so we are in a different place. A commission will rely on Democrats doing the wrong thing. I just want to do one thing, and I don't accept any commission, but I will say that the Blue Ribbon Commission is actually like less dangerous, because I'm not sure if it always means this, but my understanding is does not have the force of law, right? So there's a commission that just like says, here's our report, and then you could do nothing with it. But what they've always done are fast track commissions. So written into the legislation that sets up the commission, it says whatever findings the commission comes to, if it can pass out of the commission, it's guaranteed an up or down vote. And those are the ones that are super dangerous, because that's taking it right into the smoky back room, and they negotiate without any of us, like not in regular order, not in committee. And whatever comes out, they get a vote on. It's super dangerous. It's also like catnip to politicians, Democrats include, like the media rewards pablum about bipartisanship, right? Like the media would be like, this bipartisan plan to punch everyone in the face is so brave. It's so brave for both parties to be doing the wrong thing.
Right. And this is Washington functioning at last. This is what we want.
At last, everyone will get punched in the face because Washington's gotten its act together. And you're like, if a house is on fire and one side is saying use water to put it out, and the other side is saying use jet fuel, the right answer is not half water, half jet fuel. Right? That's what the media has such an annoying tendency. And it's written into their corporate identities. This is big money, but that's the story they love telling. Like somehow taking half bad and half good is better than just good. Ideas and policies have to be rated on, do they work for the people or not?
Right.
Not on some sort of weird bipartisan fetish that exists in this town.
You just mentioned how this idea of negotiating through a commission in private, away from the public eye. I recall there's this bit of your testimony where you say that Joni Ernst would have done George Orwell proud, because she said we were going to have an open and honest conversation. That's what we want about Social Security, while advocating having a closed door commission that then produces binding recommendations that will inevitably reduce people's benefits.
And that's part of that Leninist strategy is, again, just lie to the people. It's lie about what it is that you're trying to accomplish, which is why truth tellers like you and your show are so important, to remind people that the story, it's not about the how, because they'll always come up with a how, right? It's not even about the Democrats who might do the wrong thing. The most important fact is that the Republicans have one thing that they do, right? It's one thing, and they wait decades for the opportunity to do it. And the thing is to destroy Social Security. It's like they carve it into their heart. Because think about what they're doing. I know you know this, but just to state it, holding the debt ceiling hostage. The last time they did this, the U.S. sovereign debt was downgraded by S&P, not because of the inability for the United States to pay its bills, but just because of the political fact that a minority party can force the hand of the government and not pay the bills. And they use that threat not to make people's lives better or do anything in any of the things that they run on, even the terrible things that they run on, right? They don't use the debt ceiling to force through, building a wall or any of their other dumb ideas. It's important to remember that in the constellation of their dumb ideas, getting rid of Social Security is their North Star. It's what they always return to. And we have to remember that. The villain here is the Republican ideology that says this system works and does not benefit our billionaire benefactors, and therefore we must destroy it. As soon as that is understood, then it's easy. Any of their ideas, you're like, oh, it's either a better or worse version of destroying the system. You don't have to give it the benefit of the doubt. You don't have to take a knee and be like, no, tell me, Republican, what's your idea to destroy the system? You only have to defeat it. And the way we defeat it is by letting people know that that's what's going on. The Republicans are coming to destroy our Social Security, and we have to defeat them.
Right. And there are lots of ways that they're going to sneakily try and push things that seem unrelated to destroying Social Security, but actually about destroying Social Security. Like, for example, I think you cited this idea, we want all federal laws to expire unless they're reauthorized or something like that, which is another way that they can hopefully find a way to make sure that Social Security is held hostage and they have the power to cut it as much as they like.
Because they leave out in that when they say, oh, well, we want to do it. Ron Johnson, who is the dumbest person in Congress, and I know full well that George Santos is a member and everything. I know.
Yeah.
But this man.
It's an achievement.
It is an achievement of some sort. But Ron Johnson wants to redo it. He said it was every year. Every year, we want to bring up all of the programs. And then Rick Scott said every 5 years. And both of them left off the fact that every 5 years or every year, they would be on the side saying, don't fund it, right? Like they leave out that really important fact that they want it to be debated and voted on every year. And every time it's voted on, the Republicans would vote to end it. The Republicans would vote to cut it. The Republicans would do what they've been doing for 40 years, which is lying to the face of the American people as they surreptitiously move their plans to destroy Social Security.
And it's pretty much all of them, too. I mean, the Republicans are pretty unified on this. I mean, some Democrats are, as you said, they're getting a little better than they were during the Obama years, but Republicans are all on board with destroy all federal benefits to anyone.
It's true. And I always do wonder, like, do they get a manila envelope delivered to them, right? Because, like, a lot of like backbencher Republicans whose names no one, we don't know. They all look the same. So the hardest part of tracking them on the Hill is actually knowing who they are, because you can probably name like 10 of them in the House or something like that, right?
Yeah, right.
But there's a lot more than that. They are all like a machine, they're actually really good at it. And I'm like, how do they put such discipline in this? And I'm like, what kind of manila envelope is delivered on day one? Here's what you must do: hurt people.
I know. Our agenda, point one,
hurt people. Because their constituents, and I this is absolutely true, outside of Washington, D.C., the bipartisan consensus on Social Security is massively in favor of expanding benefits.
Yeah.
It's massively against cutting benefits. So more people in this country, according to public polling, believe in the Loch Ness Monster than want to cut Social Security benefits by like a significant amount. I think it was 15-9 the last time I did this. I love that example, but it's hard to get across just how deeply people in America feel about Social Security and that they love it. And then you look in on DC, and it's like there's a story being told that there's this bipartisan consensus on the grand bargain or something. And again, I think we are in a materially different place than in 2011, much stronger, including President Biden right now stating, again and again, I will not negotiate on Social Security and Medicare. I know you remember the State of the Union that Obama did right now. So Biden's going to give his State of the Union in February 7th. When Obama did this was the one that he pivoted to austerity and just began this full bore campaign on austerity after the shellacking in the midterms. And Biden is not there at all. So we have, a president, we have allies in the Senate and in the House who are saying they're not giving a millimeter to this. So I do think we're in a better, and 25% of the Republican majority is George Santos in the House. So they are not in as strong a position as the Tea Party. So I think if the American people are waking up fast enough to the threat to Social Security, there's 18 Republicans in the House who are in districts that Biden won. And there's another about 18 who are in districts that are Trump districts by like 0.1%. We only need 4, 5, or 6 of them, depending on who's healthy and alive in the House caucus. The majority actually changes based on who's able to come vote. So like right now it's 4, but I think it's actually 5. We spend a lot of times on spreadsheets here in DC, right?
Okay.
But it's all about, can we find 5 or 6 of these Republicans who will vote with the Democrats and cut Kevin McCarthy's plan off at the pass? And I think we can.
Yeah, and a big part of that is exposing what the actual agenda is, because it's so hideously unpopular. Yeah, we got to have that Leninist party discipline on our side like they do.
They're definitely not going to do it because it's the right thing, right?
Sure. No, right. No. Because we scare them.
Exactly. Only because we scare them into the fact that they will lose their jobs if they do this.
Yeah, if you had any ethics or morality, you wouldn't be a member of the United States Republican Party. So I want to get to, before we close, the big lie, of course, which is that Social Security is going to be bankrupt unless we do something now. There is polling suggesting that a lot more millennials and Generation Z people are worried that they're not going to get Social Security because all they hear over and over is this very effective talking point: it's going away, it's going away, it's going away, repeated ad nauseum. So perhaps you could explain how this big lie about Social Security is going to go bankrupt unless we take some step that is going to reduce benefits in some way.
It's very sophisticated attack, but at the same time, it's really basic. And so as soon as you know that this is what they always do, you can become, inoculated to it. But it's an old tactic of union busting as well. The goal is you convince people that they're going to get nothing, right? You're going to get 0. If you do X or don't do X, you're going to get nothing. And then they're willing to accept less than they're owed. So if you think you're going to get nothing, and then I'm like, but if you work with me, I might be able to get you 70 cents on the dollar. That sounds better than 0 cents on the dollar. And so it's part of the Leninist strategy is a very sophisticated, coordinated propaganda attack against Social Security, that it's quote unquote going bankrupt or running out of money. And it's hard to fight back because it is a big lie, because it's so wrong and so big that you're like, well, could Defense Department run out of money? Is that possible? Can the White House, can the government, is that possible that running out of money happens or bankruptcy happens? And the answer is no. Unless the entire United States government fails, that would be when Social Security couldn't pay its benefits. But I think there'd be we're talking Mad Max scenarios at that point.
Right.
So the big lie is that Social Security doesn't have money. In fact, the Defense Department, if it could go bankrupt, it's a much more likely candidate because it doesn't have its own funding. It gets funded at $7 trillion for 10 years every single year. But Social Security is self-funded. It literally doesn't even pull any money from the general fund. That's what makes it even more annoying. We pay for our Social Security benefits. It's our money. We see it go in out of our paychecks. So when they're saying that it has no money, it's patently false. And also, it's insulting to the fact that it's our money. They're saying oh, well, we can't pay you anymore. And you're like, well, we don't need you to pay us, Washington, D.C. Politicians. It's already self-funded through the payroll tax. So the goal is the important thing to keep in mind. Now, it is true that as inequality has gotten greater and greater and greater, I think we've just crossed or are right about at the worst inequality that this country has ever seen. The last time was around when Social Security was created. But more and more income is slips around the payroll cap. And this gets to the crux of it. Most people don't know that not everyone pays into Social Security on all of their income. Only the first 147,000, I think now, is taxed. And after that, people pay in zero. So the majority of people in this country pay in on 100% of their income. But the super wealthy, they stop paying in on second number one, January 1st every year.
Yeah. Pretty regressive by definition. That's about as regressive as a thing can get, isn't it?
It's the most regressive funding, and we could do a whole show on this. But the amazing thing is that the benefit structure is so progressive that it overpowers the regressivity of the funding and actually becomes the most redistributive program, or one of the most. EITC, you could say, is more redistributive, but magnitude-wise, nothing touches Social Security. So the thing is, imagine what we could do if we made the funding structure progressive as well. And all we have to do that is say millionaires and billionaires pay in to Social Security the same rate, just like the rest of us, on all of their incomes. And then we can not only fund Social Security for the next centuries as we can right now, but we can expand benefits for everyone in this country. And that is the only problem with Social Security right now, is that benefits are too low for millions of people.
Yeah, we've been on the defensive for most of this conversation, so I'm glad you got to. Let's take it in the opposite direction. Instead of fighting to protect what we've got, let's talk about lowering the retirement age, not just maintaining it, but making sure that, in the wealthiest country in the world, people have the maximum amount of time to enjoy in their old age. Perhaps we could conclude with just an explanation, reiteration of why this program is so valuable and so incredible, what it has managed to do for people, what it can do for people, and what the vision of a good retirement that every American deserves is.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important to remember the moral compass aspect of this. What was it that Francis Perkins and the New Dealers were trying to do? They looked around and they saw that everyday people were at the whims of not only the billionaire class, but the billionaire class didn't control everything. They just hoovered up all the money, but things could spin out of control in terms of the Great Depression. The New Dealers saw that there could be systemic responses that not only mitigated the immediate effects of the Great Depression, but put in place systems that actually ameliorated all of those negative effects going forward. That's what Social Security is. It not only took care of this desperate need in the Great Depression era, but it eliminated, say, the poorhouse going forward. The philosophical bent of Social Security is an ever-expanding system of economic security that delivers greater and greater economic security for more and more people. When FDR signed it into law, he said, with this law, I lay the cornerstone that future generations can build upon. And that's what we have to recognize. For example, Medicare for all, or a guaranteed national health system. That's the most obvious one. You cannot pretend that you can have retirement security or economic security if you can go bankrupt by getting sick or having an illness. And especially now in the midst of the pandemic and what we've seen, it's more obvious than ever. You also, though, can't have a secure retirement if you've been working your whole life for poverty wages. Poverty wages will follow you into poverty in retirement. So we need to increase wages. If you use as sort of your North Star instead of the Republicans' North Star of like destroying things that work and hurting people, if you use as your North Star Francis Perkins' vision for an America where if you played by the rules, if you did the things that most people want to do, that if you worked hard, the system would be there for you, including if something that no one wants to think about, but happens to far more people than they think, like becoming disabled. A person becomes ill or has an injury and they can no longer work. Well, Francis Perkins didn't have that in the bill that was signed by FDR. We added disability later because we saw like, oh, well, you can't have economic or retirement security if you lose your wages because you become disabled. We have to always look at this system and say, how can we make it better for people? How can we make it to expand economic security in this country? And added benefit, it decreases wealth inequality. It's a check against the upward redistribution of wealth that the billionaire class have perpetrated on us for decades.
Well, Alex Lawson of Social Security Works, we wish you the best of luck in the fight. People can join that fight, however, by going to socialsecurityworks.org, where they can pick up the book, Social Security Works for Everyone, which debunks a lot of the talking points, lays out a plan to expand Social Security. They can also sign your organization's petition to expand Social Security and get updates on Social Security Works activity. Alex Lawson, thank you for joining us on Current Affairs today.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Current Affairs Podcast is a product of Current Affairs Magazine. If you are not subscribed to Current Affairs Magazine, visit currentaffairs.org/subscribe today and get our glorious print edition. The Current Affairs Podcast is released regularly every week on patreon.com/currentaffairs. Thanks for listening.